This is not just an engine. This is a legend cast in metal. Because when people talk about the Nissan Skyline GT-R R34, they don't just remember the car. They remember what lived inside it. Backhand index pointing right, the Rb26 DTT. A name that became bigger than the machine itself. Because this engine was never built to be ordinary. It was built to dominate, to survive pressure, to handle power, to become the kind of motor that doesn't just win respect. Backhand index pointing right, it demands obsession. At first glance, it may look like just another inline-six. But the moment you understand what Nissan created here, everything changes. Because the Rb26 is not special just because it's famous. It's famous because it was special from the beginning. A 2.6-liter twin-turbocharged inline-six. Built with one purpose. Backhand index pointing right, give the GT-R a heart worthy of its name. And what made it dangerous was not just the number on paper. Not just the official horsepower. Not just the badge. It was the engineering behind it. Because Nissan didn't build this engine for comfort. They built it for control, strength, balance, and war on the road. This block was built from cast iron. Heavy? Maybe. But weak? Never. And that is exactly why tuners all over the world fell in love with it. Because while other engines chased lightness, the Rb26 was built like it expected abuse. Boost, beat, high RPM, hard launches, long pulls. This engine wasn't scared of pressure. Backhand index pointing right, it was born for it. And then come the twin turbos. Not there for smooth marketing. Not there for luxury. They were there to transform the way this engine delivered power. Because the Rb26 does not hit like a lazy engine. It builds. It climbs. It comes alive. And once the revs rise, once the boost starts breathing, backhand index pointing right, the whole personality changes. That's when the engine stops feeling mechanical and starts feeling alive. And that is what made the R34 so addictive. Because this wasn't just power. This was anticipation. A feeling that something bigger was building under your right foot. Something tense. Something mechanical. Something angry. And when it finally delivered, it didn't feel soft. It felt earned. Now officially, Nissan kept the power figure conservative. 276 horsepower. That was the number everyone saw. But the truth? Everyone knew this engine had more in it. Much more. Because the Rb26 was one of those rare engines where the official spec never told the full story. And that mystery made it even more dangerous. Because once enthusiasts got their hands on it, once tuners started unlocking what was hidden inside, backhand index pointing right, the Rb26 became a monster. Bigger turbos, more boost, fuel upgrades, ECU tuning, better breathing. And suddenly this engine was living in a completely different world. 400 horsepower, 500 horsepower, 600 and beyond. Not because it was easy, but because the foundation was there. That is the difference. A lot of engines can make power. Very few can build a legacy around it. And the Rb26 did exactly that. Because this engine became more than a factory creation. It became a platform, a weapon, a statement. It told the world that Japan was no longer trying to compete. Backhand index pointing right, Japan was here to lead. And then there's the sound. Because every legendary engine has a voice. And the Rb26 does not sound ordinary. It doesn't have the deep thunder of a big American V8. It doesn't scream like an exotic Italian V12. It has something else. Something sharper. Something more technical. A metallic, turbocharged, high-revving sound that feels like pure tension. Like the engine is always on edge. Always ready. Always seconds away from exploding into full force. And when you hear that sound echoing through a tunnel, or screaming through the night, you instantly know what it is. Backhand index pointing right, that is not just noise. That is identity. But what truly made the Rb26 immortal was the way it matched the GT-R itself. Because the R34 was not a soft machine. It was precise, focused, driver-oriented. Every part of the car felt like it was built around confidence. And the Rb26 sat at the center of all of it, giving the GT-R its aggression, its character, its soul. Without this engine, the R34 would still be iconic. But with this engine, backhand index pointing right, it became untouchable. Because the Rb26 gave the car a personality that numbers alone could never explain. It made the R34 feel mechanical in the best possible way. Raw, connected, honest. You don't just press the throttle and go. You feel the engine building towards something. You feel the turbos waking up. You feel the machine asking for commitment. And that is exactly why people still worship it today. Not because it was the newest, not because it was the most advanced by modern standards, but because it had character so strong. It refused to age. Even now, decades later, the RB26 still lives in conversations, builds, drag strips, street legends, and dream garages. Because real legends do not disappear. They evolve. And this engine did more than power a car. Backhand index pointing right, it powered an era. An era where performance felt raw. Where tuning culture exploded. Where the Skyline GT-R stopped being just a Japanese coupe and became a global icon. So no, the Nissan Skyline GT-R R34 engine is not just a 2.6-liter twin-turbo inline-six. It is not just cast iron, pistons, boost, and noise. Backhand index pointing right, it is one of the most respected performance engines ever made. A machine built with strength. A design built for tuning. A sound built for memory. And a legacy built for eternity. Because some engines are made to move cars. But the RB26? Backhand index pointing right, the RB26 was made to move history.